Good morning and welcome to episode 81 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. I'm joined today, as I am each and every Friday, by Hacker, the host of Hacker After Dark, which you can catch each weekday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on 92.5 FM and 1010 XL. Hacker, today you and I are going to do another March Madness kind of Jaguars-themed bracket challenge because I had a lot of fun doing one with Mia yesterday. We broke down all the third place teams who finished third in their division from last year in the NFL to predict who among them would do best in 2025. Today, Hacker and I are going to do something even more Jaguars-centric. But before we get into all of that, Hacker, welcome back. And how's your bracket in real March Madness doing so far?
Gus, good to be with you. Yeah, I'm actually not terrible. For some reason, unbeknownst to me, I picked Georgia, which kind of just really chaps me a little bit. Yeah, I guess because they beat Florida a couple weeks ago, so I just kind of drank the Kool-Aid. But I'm 12-4, which is pretty good, except I did lose a Sweet 16 team. Missouri, I don't know what that was last night. So 12-4, all things considering, not terrible. But the fact that I lost a Sweet 16 team is rubbing me the wrong way a little bit.
Yeah, it is tough. I don't know. I feel like Drake was almost like the favorite Cinderella of almost any team. So I had them advancing one round, but probably not two. My brackets, I don't know what my record is, but I don't think I have any Sweet 16 teams out. So I'm doing okay after day one, but certainly looking forward to day two today and the rest of the NCAA tournament. But again, we are turning that into some Jaguars content. And so here's a look at today's bracket. Today we are deciding the champion of who is the best player on the Jaguars. And Hacker and I decided before this that Trevor Lawrence will not be included in this exercise because we both believe that he is hands down the best player on the roster. So hopefully no one has a problem with that decision. But yeah, we're going to break down these 8 players in terms of seeding. Brian Thomas is the 1 seed. Josh Hines-Allen is a 2 seed. We also have Trayvon Walker, Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, Tyson Campbell, Logan Cooke, and Walker Little listed. And so let's start out with the first matchup, which is the 1-seeded Brian Thomas Jr. against the 8-seeded Walker Little. Hacker, I don't necessarily need your thoughts right now on Brian Thomas because I am assuming that he will be passing this round. So we can talk about Brian later. But more so my question for this specific matchup is, do you think that Walker Little is the 8th best player on the Jaguars, not including Trevor Lawrence? Or do you think that maybe there was a snub and you would have liked to see me list someone else here instead as the last spot in this bracket?
You know, it's interesting between best or most important. I don't know if Walker Little is the 8th best player, but he's probably among the 8 most important just because he's the left tackle, presumably, protecting Trevor Lawrence's blind side, and Trent Baalke on his way out the door, Gus, as you know, gave him a contract extension. So, again, it's what your definition is, best or most important. But if we're talking about the most important Jaguars, then yeah, Walker Little probably deserves to be on that list. I hope he's not one among the 8 best, because if he is among the 8 best, this roster is got some problems. But I do believe absolutely he is among the most important.
Yeah, that's certainly a good point. I did bring a stat along for each of the 8 contestants that I have listed in this bracket that we're going to break down. So for Walker Little, the stat that I found comes from PFF. He ranked 25th out of 83 qualifying offensive tackles last year in PFF's like blocking efficiency rating on true pass sets. So again, 25th out of 83 players. And the reason to me that the true pass sets specific angle is important is because it like takes out screens and play action and stuff like that. But more so, it also takes out throws, plays where a throw happened in 2 seconds or less. And so like for this metric, like Walker Little isn't being awarded for like not allowing the pressure when Trevor Lawrence or Mac Jones got the ball out super quickly, even if it wasn't a screen. So I think that's important because like we've talked a lot about how like Liam Cohen will help out so many players on the offense, but including the offensive line, and by like having well-designed play action and screen plays and stuff like that, you can really take a lot of heavy lifting off the offensive line's chest as opposed to like doing 40 true dropbacks a game. So I think, long story short, it is encouraging that Walker Little on those quote-unquote true pass sets did fare well in PFF's metric. And so I I had a hard time deciding like which offensive lineman really to include with this eighth spot. I was basically between Walker and Anton. So Hacker, do you think that like I guess what I'm saying is that I think Walker Little is probably the best lineman right now on the Jaguars. Would you agree with that, or are you a little bit more iffy on that take?
Yeah, I think it's clearly one of the two between he and Anton. But no, I have no problem with Walker Little being on the list. I guess my question is, and I think I know the answer, but it's worth bringing up. Chuma Dogba, Fred Johnson, both guys have started numerous games at tackle in their career. In fact, Fred Johnson just played 6 games for the Philadelphia Eagles, who just won the Super Bowl. Edogba's got 10 starts for Dallas in the last 2 years. Don't know what they're going to do in the draft yet, obviously, but based on what we're going on right now, I'm fairly convinced that Walker Little and Anton Harrison are your opening day tackles. Talk to me in late April, right? Because I don't know. I think James Gladstone and Liam Cohen have proven that they don't have ties to anybody on this team.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, I'm fine with Walker Little being on the list. But if they draft a Will Campbell or somebody, in that top 5, this could be a really different conversation in about a month.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if like Will Campbell ends up being the pick and then they don't even really say what position they plan on him being. And like it might just be kind of an open competition across the entire offensive line where I feel like Patrick McCarry's value is like not that, oh, you can just plug him into the right guard spot immediately. It's that you can do that, but then you can also move him around based on like if and when Will Campbell or whoever else ends up beating out a potential other starter. And so be definitely very interesting to see how the offensive line shakes out. But I assume that we both are going to take Brian Thomas Jr. to advance in the first round as the number 1 seed. So let's get to the next matchup, which is a 4 versus 5 seed, 2 linebackers, Devin Lloyd versus Foye Oluokun. I think that the vast majority of people would go with Foye in terms of kind of like name recognition and production of what we've seen on the field. And there's a lot of reasons to go with Foye. I think that Devin is probably one of, if not the most underrated player on the entire Jaguars roster. So where do you land, Hacker, on this one?
I mean, Foye Oluokun's a tackling machine. I think clearly he deserves to be advancing to the next round. Having said that, what a huge year in the career of Devin Lloyd 2025 is going to be. I mean, when you talk about the trajectory of a career for a former first-round pick, this is a gigantic year for Devin Lloyd. So I would imagine, particularly in Campanelli's new scheme, that Devin Lloyd might have a very good 2025 because people tend to have really good years when contracts are around the corner. But for the here and now, what we can go on, clearly in that linebacker room, I would have Foye Oluokun advancing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think just to me, like the age and experience is kind of like the cutoff where I think that they're kind of like similar tiers of players. But again, just kind of like leaning on the experience. I don't think Foye has showed signs of like getting close to an age cliff or anything where his play is about to drop off dramatically or anything like that. But Devin Lloyd, definitely, like I said, underrated. Stat from Field Vision Pro is that he ranks 12th among 54 linebackers last year in their havoc rating. So kind of like tackles behind the line of scrimmage, total tackles, completions allowed, pass deflections, stuff like that. And so I feel like a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think of Devin Lloyd as like a disruptor for the Jaguars last year, but you also have to consider that the Jaguars defense in general was not disruptors. They ranked dead last in turnovers. They were bottom 5 in sacks. And so when this havoc stat is like relative, not just to like the player's position group, but also to like other players in the scheme on their team. And so Devin Lloyd, I think, just underrated, kind of underappreciated, even in terms of like the total metrics. I think that his like advanced and like efficiency metrics paint a better picture of him combined to just like total tackles and stuff like that. But then my stat for Foye Oluokun is that last year when he was on the field, or when he was off the when Foye was on the field last year for the Jaguars defense, they allowed 0.09 EPA per play, which basically means they would have been like a bottom 5 defense, or they were a bottom 5 defense with him on the field. But when he was off the field, the Jaguars allowed a 0.19 EPA per play, which would have been the worst defense since the 2020 Lions, which was like one of the worst defenses of all time. And so the point there is that like Foye Oluokun, I view him as like the spine of the defense, and more so as like a safety blanket, almost like the way that we talk about tight ends sometimes. It's just like without Foye, like everything kind of starts to collapse in the middle of the defense. So certainly two very important players, but yeah, I think I'm with you that I would take Foye to advance for now.
And quickly on Foye, love that stat, by the way. Foye Oluokun, again, probably the most important guy outside of, I would say, Hines, Allen, Walker, and Campbell. I would put Foye probably fourth on the list of most important Jaguars. The Devin Lloyd thing, going back to him for a second, I know you've talked to people in Green Bay since they hired Campanile. I've had a bunch of Packer guys on as well, writers and such. Campanile is getting credit for last year with the turnaround of Quay Walker and Edge Cooper in Green Bay.
Yeah.
Two guys, two linebackers that were thought to be somewhat disappointments before Campanile got them, and obviously they had really good years last year. Hopefully lightning strikes again here in Jacksonville, and Campanile can have that sort of effect on Devin Lloyd.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a number of players that had a big kind of career year or a big jump in their production because of the scheme that Green Bay implemented for the first time last year. And not like including linebackers, but really across the board. And so I'm excited really for the whole defense when they're kind of transitioning to more of a attacking defense. But let's get to this next matchup. I think this is also another spicy matchup. It's Travon Walker against Tyson Campbell. Acker, who do you think's the better player?
Battle of Georgia Bulldogs here.
Right.
Boy, that's an interesting one because, you want to say Travon, but man, they paid Tyson like a top 10 corner, or at least Balky did when he was here. I'm gonna go Travon Walker, but that's the closest one we've had to this point. I could very easily be swayed to go Tyson Campbell. Both guys massively important to the defense. Both guys among the best players on the Jaguars. This to me would maybe be an overtime matchup, maybe a buzzer beater at the end. But I'm gonna go Travon Walker by a hair, but that's a close one.
Okay, I am thinking pretty much the same thing. Point very close and similar to like Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun, and really like every player that we talk about. Like even if they don't advance past the matchup, obviously these are the best players on the team, so we don't have anything bad to say about them. With Travon, the stat that I have is that he joins T.J. Watt, Trey Hendrickson, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Daniil Hunter, John Grenard, and Zach Sealer, who's an underrated defensive tackle in the Dolphins, as the only players with double-digit sacks in each of the past two seasons. And so I feel like Travon has like developed a lot quicker and faster and kind of better than a lot of people expected. I think that everyone knew that he was a little bit of a raw prospect coming out of college, especially relative to Aiden Hutchinson, the second pick directly after him. But he has really progressed nicely and, again, very quickly. And it's like especially notable that he's got production considering the lack of production kind of around him. It's really hard to be productive, especially in terms of sacks, but really like I feel like any statistic when you don't have a lot of help around you. And so Travon definitely blossoming before your eyes. But my pick here is Tyson Campbell because I think that he's been even underappreciated a little bit in Jacksonville, but absolutely on a national scale where I think that most people view him as like a solid cornerback, a cornerback that deserves in the league. But I'm more so of the opinion that he's a true cornerback one, and maybe not necessarily someone like a Darrelle Revis, because there's only a handful of people like Darrelle Revis in the history of league that can truly go mano a mano and doesn't need safety help and can match up one-on-one. Tyson's strength is more so in zone coverage when he can get eyes on the quarterback and kind of let his football instincts and intelligence paired with his great athleticism do a lot of heavy lifting for him. The stat I've got for Tyson is that he ranked 14th among 76 cornerbacks in target rate last year, according to Field Pro Vision. I think that's similar to like people talk about wide receivers, and like a really good stat to measure receivers is simply targets, because like it shows that you're good enough to be targeted. And so I think for the inverse of this, obviously good cornerbacks are not going to be targeted a lot. And you can say that like, well, even if Tyson is, he just has to be like okay, and opposing quarterbacks would probably still headhunt after like the other non-Tyson cornerbacks. But I still think that he's the kind of guy that really dictates coverage. Again, kind of comparison between offense and defense. Like people talk about wide receivers as being field tilters, which doesn't necessarily mean field stretchers. It's more so field tilters, kind of like dictate coverage, and opposing defenses and coordinators like have to make sure they have enough resources over to one side of the field to contain that guy. So for the inverse for Tyson, like he's a field tilter, and that the defense is able to like put resources farther away from Tyson because he's able to just man so much of an area of the field. So I've been really impressed by Tyson's play for seasons now, and obviously the best ability is availability, and Tyson does need to stay on the field. But I think that he's a better football player as of now, and so I don't know how we're going to split this vote because.
No, you know what? You can sway me on Tyson Campbell. Like I said, I was kind of six in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Real quick on both guys. You mentioned Campbell. Big year coming up for him because he doesn't have the label yet, but he's starting to get that label of a guy that'll miss some games with soft tissue situations. And he had the hamstring last year that cost him 4 or 5 games. So a big year for him to stay healthy because that secondary is drastically different when he's available compared to when he's not. And Trayvon Walker, he gets so much grief because he was the number 1 pick. I get the vibe that if Trayvon Walker was like the 4th pick, he wouldn't get a lot of grief nationally. Take the last, because I know Hutchinson got hurt last year, so we're not going to count that. But the last 24 games that both Walker and Hutchinson have played. So basically the entirety of 2023 and like the first 7 games of 2024. Blank out the names and just go stats. Tackles for loss, quarterback pressures, all that stuff. And if you look at it, it's like a dead heat between the two. There's a narrative that Aiden Hutchinson is just vastly better than Trayvon Walker. And while I agree when healthy, I would probably take Hutchinson, I think it is a little closer than some people believe just based on the numbers.
Yeah, to me, it's like it's all about Hutchinson. I think that like if Hutchinson wasn't in the class, even if people were like, oh, like Trayvon Walker wasn't like the consensus top player in that class, might have been not like a very slight reach, but at the same time, like 10 sacks in consecutive seasons is 10 sacks in consecutive seasons. That's great for any player, including a first overall pick. And so I think, like, to me, I definitely hear your point where if he was the 4th overall pick, then like the viewpoint on him would be different. But to me, it's like really just all about Aiden. Like if Aiden Hutchinson was not in that draft class, then like I think people would say, yeah, Trayvon, that was like an interesting pick at the time, but like it's worked out for him. He's a really good player. So hopefully both Trayvon and Josh Hines-Allen get some more help here in the offseason, especially in next month's draft. But speaking of Hines-Allen, our final first-round matchup is JHA against Logan Cooke, our representative from special teams. Logan Cooke ranks 5th in NFL history in yards per punt. And so I think everyone in Jacksonville knows that Logan is like a great player, has been a great player since he was drafted by the team in 2018. But like this guy is like potentially on the path to be a Hall of Famer, if not at least like in the pride of the Jaguars. And so Logan Cooke, certainly a legendary Jaguar, but also kind of a tough first-round draw for him going against Josh Hines-Allen, who ranks 5th in pressure rate since 2022, behind only Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, and Trey Hendrickson. So is this an easy one for you too, Hack?
Yeah, I'll go Hines-Allen, but honorable mention to Logan Cooke. He's an absolute stud. Love Logan Cooke. I think he's the best punter in the league for what that's worth. And he's had a lot of opportunities because the offense has been terrible for the last few years. So we've seen a lot of Logan Cooke. I would like maybe not to see as much of Logan Cooke now with Liam Cohen here. Nothing against Logan, but if the punter's on the sideline, that's probably good news for the team in general. Hines-Allen to me advances, but take nothing away from Logan Cooke. Again, I think he's the best punter in the league.
Yeah, and honorable mention as well to Ross Matisic and Cam Little, who I think that some fans would understandably argue should be involved in this bracket. But for the sake of the exercise, we just went with one special teams player. Shout out to all those guys, though. So let's take an updated look at the bracket. We've got the semifinals coming up here. Well, I got to pull this up. Here we go. Semifinals. Or quarterfinals, actually. Excuse me. So we're going to have – no, it is the semifinals. I'm sorry. It's the morning. We got Brian Thomas versus Foye Oluokun in one matchup, and then we've got Tyson Campbell versus Josh Hines-Allen in the other. So let's start out with Brian Thomas versus Foye Oluokun. Just what are your thoughts on Brian Thomas specifically, since we kind of passed him over in the first round, Packer?
Absolute stud, beast, the guy, whatever verbiage you want to use. I mean, he's the wide receiver one here in Jacksonville. That conversation can finally be put to bed. I think he's already among the top 15, maybe top 10 wide receivers in the game. And I think back to last year, and you and I have had this conversation. Brian Thomas Jr., what he did when they started finally throwing him the ball with Mac Jones in the last month. Now you have Liam Cohen, Grant Udinski, guys that the game has not passed by. Like I think it passed by Doug Peterson and Press Taylor a little bit. I am salivating at the idea of what Brian Thomas Jr. could do in this offense. I think he might. I mean, he had 87 for 1282 and 10 touchdowns last year. I think the sky could be the limit for him. I think De'Ami Brown's going to help him. Gabe Davis if he stays healthy. So very, very high on Brian Thomas Jr. Again, take nothing away from Foye Oluokun, one of the most important players on the team, one of the best players on the team. But to me, it's a no-brainer that Brian Thomas Jr. goes to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, he's played 1 year in the NFL, 1 year in a Jaguars uniform, and he's already one of the greatest in franchise history, I think. I also think he's one of the top 5 receivers of the NFL right now, as is. And I think the most exciting thing about him is that he was just a 22-year-old rookie last year, a young 22-year-old too, and has just so much more room to grow. He's definitely not just a guy that wins because of his athleticism. Obviously, you don't finish third in the NFL in receiving yards as a rookie just because you're really athletic. You got to have some football skill too. But you could see the football skill progressing throughout his rookie season. And he did get more and more targets because of injuries that went down around him to the pass catching group. But at the same time, going back to what I said earlier, targets are earned, and getting targets and getting production isn't a bad thing whatsoever in any context. And so the fact that he was able to grow personally, but then also to put the team on his back after injuries to the pass catcher unit, but also to Trevor Lawrence, the sky's the limit for him. I'm excited because I think that a bottom 5 NFL receiver is currently his floor, and his ceiling is being compared truly league wide to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. The stat that I had on Brian's for today was that he joined Randy Moss, Jamar Chase, and Odell Beckham Jr. as the only rookies with at least 1,250 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns as a rookie in the Super Bowl era, which I believe is since 1967. There was only one guy before that did it, Bill Groman or something like that. So historically great. We won't be able to say enough nice things about Brian, but we will be able to talk about him a little bit more in the championship round because he will be advancing past Foye here in the semifinal. Our other semifinal matchup, Tyson Campbell versus Josh Hines-Allen. Tyson just squeaked past for the first round. What do you think about this one, Hack?
I mean, to me, it should be Hines-Allen. It probably needs to be Hines-Allen with what he's getting paid. Underwhelming year for Joshua Hines-Allen last season. I mean, let's call it what it is. Coming off 17 sacks, he did not live up to the contract that he signed last offseason. He probably knows that. So I think he's going to come out very, very motivated. He is the guy on the defense. When you think about the Jacksonville Jaguars, with all due respect to Tyson and Trayvon and Foye, you think of Joshua Hines-Allen as the Jaguar defensive leader. So from that standpoint, I believe it needs to be him. But again, not a great 2024. So that needs to improve here in 2025. Big year for Joshua Hines-Allen coming up.
Yeah, hopefully he'll get a little bit closer to his 2023 season when he set the franchise single season record for sacks with, was it 17 and a half, maybe 16 and a half. It was definitely up there. And then I think he barely fell short of double-digit sacks, actually. And so I think he's been a consistently inconsistent player. And just that's probably the thing that's separating him from being considered in the same tier as Watt, Miles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, etc. is that to do it, I mean, first of all, the small market and poor team around him and all that stuff certainly doesn't help. But to be consistently great and consistently win great matchups, he absolutely tormented Blake Fisher last year when Laramie Tunsil went down in week 4. Or Tunsil might not have started that game in the first place, but he really took advantage and absolutely controlled that game against the Texans, and I would say won that game against the Texans in week 4. But then there's other games where there's mismatches on paper that you think you really should take advantage of. and for whatever reason or not, doesn't result in the box score that you think it would. But I will say that I think that Hines Allen, one great thing about him is that he truly does what the team asks of him to do. Some players like Trey Hendrickson is an example last year where obviously he had a phenomenal season last year, but he was also freelancing a bit, which was a bit out of necessity because he needed to like kind of save his energy for later downs and more critical downs, as opposed to like just giving it his all on every first and 10 run, since he truly was putting the Bengals defense on his back last year. But Hines Allen, I know he got some flack for like bulking up in the offseason, looking a little bit slower, but like to me, both in terms of what he does on the field, but then also or off the field, but also on the field, he's like never taking a play off, never freelancing, just a great teammate, let alone a great football player. So yeah, got Hines Allen advancing to the championship round, which means we've got Brian Thomas versus Josh Hines Allen. This is a tracker. What are your thoughts, though?
And just so people know, I know you mentioned it earlier, we took Trevor Lawrence out of the equation. This is the top 8 outside of Trevor. Because I don't want people to just join us midstream, like, where's Trevor Lawrence? No, he was taken out. Close matchup between Brian Thomas Jr. and Joshua Hines Allen. These are 2 of the 3, right? When you think about the Jaguars, it's Trevor Lawrence, it's BTJ, and it's Joshua Hines Allen. So I think of the 8 guys that we had listed, this probably needed to be the final. If I'm not mistaken, these were the top 2 seeds in our little exercise here. I would probably go Brian Thomas Jr., but Gus, I mean, it is 1 year, right? I mean, Joshua Hines Allen is going to be the all-time sack leader in Jaguar history, very, very soon. It depends if you want to make this a career achievement award, but going into 2025, if you just ask me flat out who are the best players on the Jacksonville Jaguars, I would probably say Brian Thomas Jr. I'm tempted to say Hines Allen because of what he has accomplished, but the exercise is looking into the future, and if we look into the future, I think it's probably BTJ.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think that Hines Allen absolutely deserves to be talked about throughout this entire exercise and talked about as one of the best Jaguars, not just on the current roster, but ever. But to me, like, they're 2 of the best players at their respective positions in premium positions that are absolutely loaded with talent across the NFL. But Hines Allen, like, again, hasn't quite crossed that barrier in terms of like a truly elite pass rusher, guy that's seriously considered as a defensive player of the year candidate pretty much every season. And that's like not even a knock on him. Like, it's amazing to have a guy like him who's a bona fide number 1 pass rusher. Like, just because he's not Myles Garrett, like, shouldn't necessarily be a knock on him. But at the same time, like, Brian Thomas is like, he's the kind of guy that like in 5 or 10 years, like, people could compare him to Brian, like a young guy to Brian Thomas, and then it'll be like, whoa, slow down a little bit. This is Brian Thomas we're talking about. He just has like, again, the unlimited ceiling that he could just transcend Jacksonville media and really take this team to new heights. And so, yeah, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is our clear-cut winner. So one more look at the bracket. Let me get it pulled up here in a second. But
let me ask you this real quick. If Trevor were in this, is Trevor over Brian Thomas Jr., no doubt, or is there a conversation there?
I think there's a conversation there. And it also kind of comes down to like positional value a little bit what you're talking about with Walker Little, where it's like you have to measure best versus most important a little bit. That one is tough. My gut's telling me Trevor, though. What about you?
My gut would be Trevor, too, because Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be as good as Trevor is, in theory. But it's just a testament to Brian Thomas Jr. in 1 year that you could legit have a conversation. Is he already the best and most important player on the team?
Mm-hmm. I feel like Brian and Trevor, not necessarily in that order, but they just have like the best paths to Hall of Fame careers, if you want to look at it that way. But to recap, we had Brian Thomas advancing against Walker Little in the first round, Foye Oluokun advancing past Lloyd, Tyson Campbell advancing past Trayvon Walker, and Josh Hines Allen advancing past Logan Cooke. Then in the semifinals, Brian Thomas beat out Foye Oluokun, and Josh Hines Allen beat out Tyson Campbell. And to win the bracket for best current Jacksonville Jaguar, not named Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr. took the cake. So a lot of things to be excited about for the Jaguars, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Hacker, thanks so much for joining. That was a lot of fun. You have any final thoughts on this or on March Madness as we enter the weekend?
No, it's just been I mean, it's crazy to think, we're inside of 5 weeks till the NFL draft. The Jaguars just added another free agent, Fred Johnson, 10 outside free agents. What an offseason it's been. You realize they report for offseason conditioning in 2 weeks?
Ah,
They start
don't
the
tell me
offseason program in 2.5 weeks. Isn't
that's
that
crazy.
wild?
Happens.
So the offseason is flowing by, and obviously you're doing a great job of the Duval Rundown. Can't wait to join you next week.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Then, Hacker, looking forward to seeing you again next Friday. I will be back with mock drafts fresh off of the internet on Monday at 9:04 a.m. Eastern. So until then, everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe. Go Gators.